Hello, friends. I'd love in the short time we've got together to unpack a particular idea to do with this emerging ecclesiology, the mixed ecology of church. I was involved in one of the groups that helped to commend this as part of a bigger vision to the Church of England. One of my frustrations was that the theological work was deferred until after it was agreed, which makes the theologian die inside. We'll add the theology afterwards once we've agreed the idea. And not only that, but I think even more neglected was any consideration of what the internal dynamics within a mixed ecology might look like. So that's kind of what I want to tease out in this session. What might be helpful is just to initially kind of rehearse the origins of the term. You probably know that it began with the mixed economy, coined by Rowan Williams before Mission Shaped Church. So in 1999, he used it in a term. And we might actually also observe that the use of the word mixed is redundant in both economy and ecology, since both naturally infer diversity. But we can take it as a reinforcement. So 1999, Rowan Williams picked up again in the Mission Shaped Church report and detailed a little bit more there, and as a mixed economy, a combination, an extension to the legacy of the parish system as a standard ecclesial model for the Church of England, to include a diversity of churches that represent pioneering missionary approaches. And again there. Angela Tilby a little later, I think is the first one to use this phrase, mixed ecology. So she suggests mixed economy of church is nothing new, though I prefer the phrase mixed ecology. It does at least suggest that a movement might be a manifestation of the work of the creator. And so that is a little sort of hint really about a different way of imagining multiple types and aspects of church working alongside each other. And then, as I said, it was picked up fairly recently by the Archbishop of York, who was commissioned to do some work which became known as Vision and Strategy for the 2020s in the Church of England, where we announced that the mixed ecology of the church would be our aspirational norm. So in the Church of England, that is where we are. We are working on the basis that something called the mixed ecology is the norm. So let's press into that a little bit more. I'm sorry, a little bit more there from some of the synod speeches. Stephen Croft, mixed ecology, not about abandoning or dismantling one way of being the church, but in order to develop another, drawing on the Gospels. The Gospel doesn't change, but the language in which it's expressed and translated is the thing that drives this diversity of ecology. If we had more time, what I would get you to do now is get some crayons and a notebook, and I would get you to unlock the other bit of your brain, and I would get you to draw a picture of an ecology. Actually, as I've done this with students, it's been remarkably informative and fruitful. Some people think in words, others think in ideas and colours and shapes and feelings, even sounds, as students have sort of done a bit of show and tell. But I think asking a question about the picture is quite important. Let me pick up some that have come from one group of students. What might a mixed ecology look like? When I did this with some international students, a Swiss man said to me, I think of an English garden. He said, an English garden is perfect. I thought, you're not coming to my house. He said, oh, it's the gardener has placed everything where it needs to be, and everything's in its neat sections, and it's perfectly ordered. So I thought, all right, fair enough, you've imagined. So anyway, to him, that's what an ecology looks like: highly ordered, landscaped, and controlled. The next guy was Norwegian. And he said, yes, where I live from my house, we have an ecology of trees. And he said, it's a forest, but it's managed. And I think what he meant was it was lightly managed, not like the English garden, But this was where the trees are regimented, they're in rows. Some things are removed to allow other things to grow, and there's probably a process of things being chopped down and things being cultivated. So 2 pictures so far, a highly curated garden or a managed space. The third student that spoke lived in Malaysia, and he said, well, I don't know about where you live, but he said, where I live, ecology means jungle. And a jungle is wild, just to help us. And his comment was, you know, an English garden sounds lovely, a jungle is deadly. Yeah. In a jungle, everything is fighting for resources, and only the strongest and most aggressive things live. In order for the jungle to be its ecology, things have to die, things have to suffer, and there's a food chain in the jungle. Things eat things that eat other things that eat other things, and so there is some symbiosis taking place, but actually there's lots of competition. I won't do the questions because we haven't got the time of it, but for example, this is a picture from my annual holiday in France, and this is an interesting aspect of an ecology. It's of course companion planting. Gardeners of old, before pesticides, or those that don't want to use pesticides, know that certain things placed together can help each other. In this example, the roses attract the aphids away from the wine to allow them to thrive and be more abundant. So ecologies have all sorts of dynamics going on. I'm sure I've not exhausted them. I think I've got one more. We might imagine an ecology of this type, a safari, something that's open, where it's free, but of course it's natural selection, it's a food chain, it's highly competitive. Or we might have seen other kinds of ecology, like maybe a zoo, where things are managed, but they're also constrained, subdued. I don't think the tiger's living its natural tiger life there. It's in a managed space. So what might we think of ecologies? And I want to unpack that, and I want to get to a place where I can suggest maybe a framework or 2 frameworks that might help us understand ecologies. See in ecologies diversity and interconnectedness, a flow of life, an adaptation, that things adjust and evolve in order to fit their environment. We see something of succession and generations in ecologies. We see, of course, resilience. Only those things that are resilient prevail in an ecology. And of course, ecologies have thresholds. They have a stability, but that stability can be moved enough that actually the ecology can collapse. If one critical component is removed, then actually the whole ecostructure will collapse. Just to give an example, I was doing some mapping for the Northern Province. We were trying to work out how many categories of different types of churches are there, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but this was the list where we felt there were a significant number of examples. So there are far more examples than that, but we can already see, even in just the north of England, a huge variety of the types and categories of churches and styles and sizes and types of being that are in our ecology of the mixed ecology of church. Well, I wonder if we can consider the first of 2 possible frameworks. How might we understand the relationships that exist within this diversity of churches? There are others. I think in a longer talk we would look at maybe things like the qualities of family and the qualities of friendships. I don't know if you did Mrs. Gren in biology. Did anyone do that? Mrs. Gren, the 8 characteristics of living things. So they respirate, I can't remember all. They grow, they respirate, they excrete, they reproduce, etc. So there's kind of a biological deconstruction of what it means for a complex organism to be alive. So what the point I'm making is, I think there's lots of interesting ways we could unpack this, and we might need to do a few of them in order to really get our heads around what an ecology of church looks like. But I think one obvious one that we might go to is Paul's idea of the body of Christ in Corinthians, probably teaching directed initially towards converts from paganism. And here Christ is the name given to a community. And of course, the idea of the word members in that, each one of you members of the body of Christ, is talking about organs and limbs. I'm going to speed up because I'm already behind. So the body of Christ is one picture that we might think of. We could look at some of the verses. What might an ecology of churches look like? Every church is a necessary part. Every church needs the help of others. Respect is shown to those that appear less important. We are sympathetically involved in each other's sorrows and misfortunes, and the gifts of God are dispersed between us so that no one of us has all, and therefore we're interdependent because God has designed it that way. We might pick up some reflections based on that we should reflect fellow churches because they, as well as us, are vital components of the body of Christ. That there's that Paul, in presenting this imagery, subverts some of the thinking of his day, some of the Stoic literature, which was the appeal to the lower social classes to do their work because the higher levels of society needed them. The workers must work so that the elites can exist. And Paul inverts that almost to say, actually, the body of Christ thrives when the weakest are enabled and empowered. And also there's a reciprocation that exists in the body of Christ. You might have special gifts, but you're only part of what's needed. And don't think you are the be all and end all, because each of us has different parts. A second model we might look to that might help us is oddly Catholic social teaching. If you know what this is, it's a substantial body of Roman Catholic reflection over about 150 years on the application of Christian theology into wider society. What's caught my attention in reading this is it highlights some kind of principled qualities that could almost be read back now into the church to form a manifesto or a charter of what it means to be a diverse church. And I'm just going to run through some of those traits, and there are 6 of them. So in Catholic theology, one of the traits, one of the dominant themes is the idea of equal dignity. So in the mixed ecology of church, this would be the agreement that every church, no matter how big or small, new or old, successful or not, or anything else, carries equal dignity, just as we would extend that to one another as human beings. That we share a common good. So although we are maybe self-sustaining, we are interconnected, and therefore we share purpose together. And to be part of the ecology is to be in some way part of that common good, distinctive yet part, sharing enough to be able to say we are part of the same family. But there's a principle from that comes, which is of solidarity, which is because we're interconnected, then we have a tendency, we have a preference to work together where we can. Doesn't mean we work together always, but where we can, we work together. But there's a principle of subsidiarity in the body, that actually decisions are best usually made locally. So it's not, an ecology is not a top-down organization, but the flow of choice actually comes at the grassroots. That there's a principle of, thank you, ministry to or with the margins, that we prioritize the needs of the poor. And you'll remember that Paul, when he gets his when he gets his credentials checked, the one thing they ask of him is that he remembers the poor, the very thing he was eager to do. And that there is a mutual flourishing, that actually it's not a competitive environment, but if one wins, the other should win. We need to win together. I've forgotten what comes next on the slides. Maybe a few questions as we finish. What is our vision for the mixed ecology? What are the qualities that should flow within us, between us? What is the food and the life that comes between the diverse parts of this mixed ecology? How do these things flow? And who are the managers and the gardeners and the landscapers of the mixed ecology? Is it a wild survival of the fittest? Or is it a highly managed English garden? Or is it something in between? Thank you.